Shalom and welcome to 2 Minutes of Torah. This year is entitled The Appropriate Bracha for the 5 Grains, Part 1. Orach Chaim, we're zocheh to make hopefully at least 100 brachot a day. Good percentage of them are over food. And one of the most important categories of food are the 5 grains: rye, oat, spelt, barley, wheat. And the possibilities of bracha are quite wide. Could range from Shehakol to Haadama to Mezonot and Hamotzee. It's very important that we understand the basic rules, the criteria for what makes a grain, any of those brachot. So the basics are that if one eats a raw grain and it's edible, then it would be Haadama because it's borei pri Haadama. Shulchan Aruch holds that applies to all 5 grains. The Rama argues and says that barley is not really eaten raw, and therefore that would be Shehakol. That's step number 1. That's before anything is processed. Usually the grains that we have at our homes today are hard, and it's rarely a case that we'd eat those raw. But if you pick it right from the field, that would be a different case, even though it may not be done that much today. So that's the first level, is when you take it at that way, Haadama. If you go ahead and you grind it up into flour, so then it lost its Haadama state, but it didn't reach another level yet. So at that point it would be Shehakol. Then if you go ahead and process it in a way that would make it more Chashuv, then it would turn into Mezonot. But that's where things get very, very tricky. Because you could go ahead and take the grain, make it into flour, and if you bake it with sweet additional ingredients, that would be Mezonot. And if you go ahead and just make flour and water and maybe some eggs, that would be Hamotzee. That's pretty simple and straightforward. Where you're involved in tafshil, cooking, that's where things get quite complicated. We'll give an overview now, and the next year we'll get into the details. Basically, you could go ahead and process the grain in several different ways. The grain is made up of several parts. You have the outer layer, the bran, then you have the grain itself, the endosperm, and the germ. You could go ahead and take the whole grain and put that into a pot to cook it. You could go ahead and just mill it, take the outer layer and cook it. You could go ahead, take the outer layer and some of the grain itself, that's another level, and then cook it. Or you could go ahead and chop up the grain into 2 pieces or more, and then you could cook it. The fact is, the more you process the grain before you start the cooking process, then the quicker the grain will become a mezonot. Because since it was already processed before you put it into the pot to cook, then the cooking is going to go ahead and further the cooking process quicker. So you go ahead and you have the grain cut up already into several pieces, and you cook it. Even if it's not cooked for that long, it's going to become a tafshil much quicker. On the other hand, if it's a whole complete grain and you cook it for a few minutes, it's not going to become a tafshil. It will still remain Haadama. That is the general overview of the tafshil aspect of the grains in specific, and the 4 levels of the grains, which can make it either Haadama, Shehakol, Mezonot, or Hamotzee. This is the end of the Shiur for part 1, and we'll continue with the details of tafshil on Shiur number 2. Shalom.